So regarding when you have the Godot project open directly in the editor, like if you're using the project execution flag, then you might notice in the bottom right-hand corner, it says connected to the GD script language server. So this only happens if you have Godot tools installed. So it's not just useful for GD script, it's also just useful for getting feedback from the Godot editor language server directly. So if there's a problem in the Godot editor, then you get that reported in your problems panel as well, which is super helpful when working in the Godot project. However, if you're like me and you're working from a parent directory like CS setup, it's not directly in the Godot project. So you can see in the bottom right, there is no connected to the language server symbol there. So that actually requires a little bit of extra setup if you want to go that route. So the issue here is that the Godot language server attaches to the root folder, and our project.godot isn't in the root. So to get around that, what I'll do is create a workspace file, and then we'll open our projects from that instead of the folder directly. So I will hit a new file here, and let's say beginning cs.code-workspace. Then this is essentially a JSON file. So we're going to wrap everything in these curly braces. And we need a category called folders here. And then we're just going to put in an array of folders. So we need one folder here, which is actually going to be the Godot folder. I'm going to skip that auto suggestion. And let's do name, whatever you want to call it, beginning CS. And then the path, that's the part that actually has to be more absolute. So from the root folder where we have the workspace, what's the path to the Godot folder? That's just Godot. And then you can save that. That's all you need in there. So a dictionary called folders that contains an array of these folder paths with a name property and a path property, just like that, wrapped in quotations, a colon in the middle. And now if we go to File, open Workspace from File, and you double click on Beginning CS Workspace, now it's going to open up that workspace. Beginning CS is actually the Godot project. And you can see in the bottom right-hand corner that it's now connected to that. Now the advantage of having the workspace is that I can also add in any folder on the computer to that workspace file I want. Okay, so if I want to edit this workspace and add extra folders to it, I can find the workspace file on the computer or open up the folder, the parent folder directly, and then change things in here. You can give it a custom editor only name for whatever you want it to be. So maybe this would actually make more sense as like the Godot project. And then you can have any number of folders here and just include what you want inside of your Godot editing workspace. And you're going to have access to the language server just as if you had opened up the Godot project folder directly. So very handy, especially if you're working on a larger project or you need external files to be included in your editing workspace at once. So for instance, you might even build tools that help editing your Godot files at some point. So you might have like a toolkit folder here. And then if we go to the code workspace file, then we put a comma, add in another example here. So I'd say name, maybe toolkit, Godot is kind of redundant, and then path, well, it's the toolkit folder. Everything's relative to where the code workspace file is included. And then you see toolkit pops open right here. So you can include and exclude anything you need to from your editing workspace for your Godot project. So that's going to be essential if you want to have more in the Explorer than just what's contained in your Godot project folder itself, but also having access to the Godot language server. And if you don't see the Godot language server, once again, you just need to have Godot tools installed. And if you leave it on the default settings for the port on both the editor side and the Visual Studio Code side, then it should probably work fine. So if for whatever reason it doesn't show connected down here in the bottom right, but it's giving you an error instead, what you could do is check the ports. So you can see it's connected on language server 6005 here. There's a configuration setting in Godot tools up here. So if we scroll down in the settings, these settings, then you can see server port, I have it set to 6008. In the Godot editor, if you go to editor settings and you type in port, you can go to language server, remote port 6005. So having the server port here set to 005 or 008 was working fine for me. But if you need to change those values, you can try that there, and that might resolve some of your issues. But pretty much, that's about all you need to know for getting the language server set up so you can edit your Godot project in Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio Code based IDEs when you don't happen to be opening the project folder directly. But once again, if you're still having problems for whatever reason, you can always go into editor settings, external for the text editor, and then you can set it to project for your execution flag instead of something like reuse window. Because when you open your file in the project directly, it's automatically going to connect to the language server as long as you have Godot tools installed. So this would be more like when you want to have a workspace, you can use reuse window, or you can go back to using curly braces project as your default, more simplified workflow.